I never thought I'd miss the noisy chaos of college dorms until I moved into an off-campus apartment with Greg. He seemed like the ideal roommate at first, quiet, clean, and respectful, but it wasn't long before his behavior took a bizarre turn. It all started with little things. I'd come home to find my belongings slightly out of place, or my laptop moved an inch or two. I chalked it up to my imagination, or maybe Greg had needed to borrow something. I shrugged it off until the night I woke up feeling like I was being watched. My room was pitch black, but I could sense someone in there with me. My heart pounded as I fumbled for the lamp switch. The light flickered on, and there was Greg, standing in the corner of my room, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. "Greg, what the hell are you doing?" I shouted, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. Instead, he blinked a few times, as if coming out of a trance, and mumbled something about sleepwalking before shuffling back to his room. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, Greg acted as if nothing had happened. I tried to bring it up, but he brushed it off, claiming he had no memory of it. I wanted to believe him, but there was something in his eyes that made my skin crawl. A few nights later, it happened again. This time I woke up to find Greg standing at the foot of my bed, muttering incoherently. I didn't confront him this time. Instead, I pretended to be asleep, hoping he would go away. After what felt like an eternity, he finally left. I started locking my bedroom door at night, but it didn't make me feel any safer. The next incident was the worst. I woke up to the sound of my door creaking open. My heart raced as I heard soft footsteps approaching my bed. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing, as Greg leaned over me, his breath hot on my face. "I know you're awake," he whispered, sending chills down my spine. "I can hear your heartbeat." I bolted upright, shoving him away. "Get out," I screamed. "Get out of my room." Greg backed off, but his eyes were wild, almost feral. "You can't lock me out forever," he hissed, before slamming the door behind him. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I packed my bags and left, staying with a friend until I could find a new place. I reported Greg to the landlord, but I never heard what happened to him after that. Even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling of his eyes on me, watching, waiting. When I first moved into the old Victorian house, I was thrilled. The rent was cheap, and I loved the idea of living in a place with so much history. My roommate Sarah seemed nice enough, quiet, a bit reserved, but friendly. We got along well for the first few months, but then she started to change. It began with small things. She stopped talking to me, spending most of her time in her room with the door closed. When I knocked to check on her, she barely responded. I figured she was going through something and decided to give her space. One night, I woke up to the sound of soft crying. It was coming from Sarah's room. I knocked softly. "Sarah, are you okay?" The crying stopped abruptly. There was a long pause before she finally replied, "I'm fine. Go back to bed." Her voice sounded strained, but I didn't want to push her. I went back to my room, but sleep was elusive. Over the next few days, the crying became a regular occurrence. Sometimes it was soft, barely audible, and other times it was loud, almost hysterical. But every time I tried to check on her, she brushed me off. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I knocked on her door again, but this time, she didn't respond. The crying continued, louder and more desperate. I tried the door handle, it was unlocked. I hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. The room was dark, and it took a moment for my eyes to adjust. When they did, I saw Sarah sitting on her bed, her back to me, shoulders shaking with sobs. "Sarah, please let me help you," I said softly, stepping into the room. Suddenly, she went silent. She turned to face me, and my blood ran cold. Her eyes were wide and empty, like she wasn't really seeing me. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her lips moved silently, as if she were trying to speak, but couldn't find the words. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice shaking. She stared at me for a long moment before she finally spoke. "He's coming for me," she said, her voice hollow and distant. "I can't hide anymore." Before I could respond, she bolted from the room, disappearing down the hallway. I chased after her, but she was gone. I searched the entire house, calling her name, but there was no sign of her. I called the police, but they found nothing. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. For days, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The house felt different, colder, darker. I started hearing whispers in the night, soft voices I couldn't quite make out. I moved out as soon as I could, but I never found out what happened to Sarah. Sometimes late at night, I still hear her crying. When I moved into the city for my new job, I found a cozy apartment to share with a guy named Mike. He was friendly, easygoing, and we quickly became friends. Everything seemed perfect until I stumbled upon his secret. One evening, Mike mentioned he would be out late for work. After he left, I settled on the couch to watch TV. Halfway through a movie, I heard a faint thud coming from his room. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check it out. His door was ajar, and I pushed it open. The room was neat, almost too neat, but something felt off. I noticed a small locked box under his bed. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't resist. I searched for the key and eventually found it in his desk drawer. My hands shook as I unlocked the box. Inside, I found a collection of photographs, dozens of them, of different women. They were all candid shots, taken without the women's knowledge. My heart pounded as I realized these weren't just random strangers. They were all women who had lived in the apartment before me. I felt sick. There were notes attached to some of the photos detailing their daily routines, likes and dislikes. My mind raced, trying to understand what this meant. Why did he have these? What had happened to these women? I heard the front door open, and panic surged through me. I quickly locked the box and shoved it back under the bed, returning everything to its place. I tried to compose myself as I went back to the living room. Mike walked in, smiling. "Hey, how was your evening?" "Good," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just watched a movie." For the next few days, I couldn't look at Mike the same way. I was terrified, but didn't know what to do. I couldn't confront him. I had invaded his privacy, and if he found out, who knew what he might do? One night, I woke up to the sound of my door creaking open. My heart raced as I saw Mike standing in the doorway, a strange expression on his face. "Couldn't sleep," he said casually, but there was something sinister in his tone. "Thought I heard something." I forced a laugh. "Just me tossing and turning. Sorry if I woke you." He lingered for a moment before finally closing the door. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. The next day, I called in sick to work and found a new place to live. I moved out that weekend, leaving no forwarding address. I never found out what Mike's true intentions were, or what happened to the women before me, but sometimes I still have nightmares about those photographs and the possibility of what might have happened if I had stayed.